Hey everybody! Welcome to today's episode of No Killing Goblins. This is, I guess, part two, episode two of our series about The Last Light, the fifth book. What is it? No, not the fifth book. Is it the fifth book
Yeah, it's
in?
the fifth. Yep,
It's the fifth book in the Wandering Inn series. It's one half of volume four for the website readers.
yep.
We're gonna chat a little bit about stuff. I forgot to introduce you, Dragonus. I'm
It's
sorry.
okay. I'm Dragonus. Everybody here knows me because I'm cool.
Oh, sure.
No, I'm
Okay.
not.
Just because you got the just because you got dragon in your name and all that stuff.
Hey, listen. I knew from a young age that dragons were awesome. All right, and I'm perfectly happy to ride some of that popularity.
Oh my god. I just realized something.
Mm-hmm.
Like an epiphany in a moment. What is this generation's dragons?
Probably still dragons because dragons are awesome.
No, 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 no. You're not understanding what I'm saying. Okay, okay. So the 60s had the Dragonriders of Pern. The 70s and 80s had like Puff the Dragon kind of deals. The 90s had like Dragon Tales for the babies, and I think there were other Dragon series around.
Like in the
Like a
80s, there was Dragonlance.
oh, there was Dragonlance, yeah. The 2000s, what was the 2000s Dragons?
Dragons were just kind of super mainstream by then. I can't think of any specific dragon thing that really took over now that I think about it.
Now I remember. It's the How to Train Your Dragon
Oh
Dragons.
yeah, which I guess were a bit after my time, so I missed them.
And then the 2010s, was it Game of Thrones and Daenerys?
Yeah, I think it might have been Game of Thrones and Daenerys.
Wow. Okay, so what's the next series that's going to be all about the dragons? Because dragons never go away. They never go out of style.
I mean, they're still making House of the Dragon, and that, against all odds, turned out to actually be pretty good so far.
I mean, it didn't have J.R.R. George Martin's bullshit in it,
Yes, it
so
did. It's pretty much directly based off of a bunch of writing he's done on that history and time period.
the words based off of being the key there.
Sure, but like I think that you kind of have this backwards. It was when the D&D guys, I forget their names, just their acronyms D&D, which always makes me laugh, decided to move away from George R. R. Martin's writing and themes, but couldn't be bothered to make up their own because this is like a direct quote that themes are for 8th grade book reports that Game of Thrones went down the crapper.
Okay, I'm not here to discuss that. What I'm talking about is Mr. Martin's. He can create the world, but that doesn't necessarily mean he knows how to tell a story. And the directors of House of Dragons told a story. They just used his world, which is how you should adapt things and respect the material, but not be beholden to it.
Sure, but as somebody who's familiar with like the stuff that he's written about it, they're pretty much hewing pretty close to his story so far, so I'm not really certain how they're. You know what? Never mind. I'm not going to dig into this too deep. Uh,
Yeah, I don't want to either because I don't really. I have told you this before. I stopped reading his books after the first one.
that's fair. I didn't because he's a good writer.
Eh. Uh, what was I gonna like? There was a reason.
We
Okay,
were talking
so
about what's going to
we.
be whose generation's dragons, and I think ours just haven't really popped out yet. Although
What are you talking about?
I mean, not
We are not
ours.
that young.
This current like 20
20,
the new
2020s.
20s, whatever they're going to fucking call it by the end of the decade.
Oh my
I don't know
god.
if it's popped up yet, although a part of me hopes that one day Temeraire gets the adaptation it deserves. I can absolutely see that fucking taking over.
My brain is going like there's something screaming in my head saying that there's another dragon that are like that is so out there that something was announced being adapted, but I can't remember what it is. It was on like the news sites. There's like fuck me, it's gonna drive me insane. I'll find out. There's something being adapted that's supposed to have dragons in it that's really cool. And it's really old and I love it. And I can't remember what it is.
Uh,
Was it Earthsea? No, it's not
no, it's
Earthsea.
not Earthsea. They've tried adapting
Eh,
Earthsea a few times. I'm just convinced they'll
No,
never
it,
get it
it
right.
didn't. No, 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 they did not. It did not exist. Don't talk about it. It never happened.
I mean, yes, it did. Both times.
It did not happen. I live in my safe world where there was never an Avatar The Last Airbender adaptation to real time, and there was never an Earthsea adaptation. So that's my world, and I'm sticking to it.
You live in your own little world. Uh, God,
So we
now you
haven't
have me
recorded in a
thinking though,
few.
because I keep thinking that yeah, there's something with the dragon in it, but I can't for the life of me. Like,
Is it the new Dungeons and Dragons movie?
no, like there
No.
are a few iconic dragons with names in that franchise, but not so much like. Usually, it's just generic dragons. And it's not
I
another
swear to
Skyrim
God.
remake because Skyrim dragons definitely ate a whole lot of the 2010s as well.
Oh, did you see the Last of Us adaptation?
Uh, no, because I don't really like those games very much. Uh,
I didn't either, but people won't stop talking about how good the actual like show is. It's like they fixed the writing or something because they had to,
I,
and it's being talked about for like Emmy awards and stuff like that.
I mean, the writing was never what was particularly bad about those games. Uh, if anything, the writing tended to be pretty
Oh,
good, and I really liked the writing for the second one. But I feel like the second game was made for people who hated the first one, so I don't know what that says about me.
hey pirate, I need you to get up and yell at Dragonus about all the Last of Us bitchiness that you gave us for like 3 weeks. Did you forget how much Pirate complained about the Last of
I
Us?
think I may have missed Pirate complaining about The Last of Us.
Oh my god. Either Last of Us or Last of Us 2 or both of them. Pirate literally wrote like a dissertation. It was crazy. It was in acid spoilers, and then they were thinking about posting it on Twitter. This was before they actually stopped using Twitter. It was hilarious. For me, you know how much I love
Oh
drama.
yeah,
So it was just hilarious.
but no, it went completely
But
over my head. I just really appreciated that the second game really committed to being as unfun as it could if you were in any way attached to or liked the characters from the first game. But since I didn't, I thought it was great.
I I just think that there's dragons never go out like there's always something that marks a decade. I know this one's just begun and we don't know where it's going to go, but I'm really hoping that we're going to get something good out of it because so far I've not been impressed with the 2010s version. I don't love Game of Thrones. I did not go to a party. I did not do water cooler talk about it. So I missed out. I feel like I missed out on the nerd generation for that one. So where's the next one?
You know what?
What's the next?
I am going to predict that by 2030, the Wandering Inn is going to be famous and known the world around, and Terriarch gets to be the dragon of this decade.
But Wandering is not about
It's not about
dragons.
dragons, but it has dragons.
Did you see Piccard?
Oh, don't talk to me about Piccard.
Okay, I know what you're gonna say, but here's the deal. I watched the first episode.
Excuse me.
I watched the first episode of season 3. This is what the series should have been at the start. And in my head, the only way to make season 1 and 2 of Picard make sense is they needed a reason for Patrick Stewart to come back. So they created a complex backstory that would interest the Shakespearean actor and Patrick Stewart. And then they decided now's the season we're going to actually include everybody and do the thing that we said we would do with Picard, which is something of a nostalgia trip, but with more like depth to their backstories and their self. Because the first episode, a good chunk of it is just Picard and Riker bantering, and I was just here for
I
that.
don't know, Oshi, man. Like, Picard season 1 felt like somebody did a bad Mass Effect Star Trek crossover
It
and then
was
somehow
so
found a way to
bad.
get it published, and then didn't even commit to the one thing that I found compelling about the season. 2
It was
just
so
was
bad.
boring, and I gave up halfway through. I don't really see myself going through the effort of finishing 2 to watch 3. I just don't. I can't.
You don't.
No, no,
That is
do
the
not tell me I
best
can
part.
skip it to go watch it because that's not how my brain works. I'm not doing it.
I know. I know. That's fine. I'm just saying at some point in the future, suffer through season 2. go to season 3 and maybe it'll be worth, like, it's the end of the series, so it's kind of worth it.
There are too many other
For
things to do and read in life, but we'll see.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I just like here's something that's familiar and reasonably like worth, doesn't take up too much of my time. Like I could skip through a bunch of episodes of Piccard and then
Sure, and
watch
I'm
season
not going
3.
to judge you for it because one of the things that has been taking up my time has been learning that My Cousin Vinny got a tie-in book series.
I didn't know My Cousin Vinny had any adaptations. I
It's not an
Oh god.
adaptation, it's a tie-in book series. The first book is a sequel. It is, without a doubt, one of the most magnificently bad things I've ever listened to. And I don't just mean bad to listen to as in like the voices are bad because oh boy, every single person they brought into this brought their D game. One person sounds like were literally brought in over the telephone. The guy
What are
doing
you
Vinny
doing?
sounds like he has never seen the role before. And I found out about this off like a forum that I go to, and this guy described it as one of the worst things that he'd ever listened to, and I knew I had to listen to it because
Let me get this straight. There is someone out there in the world of an age who cannot stream, watch, or otherwise look at Joe Pesci and Marissa Tomei being like nutbag New Jersey people in the South defending somebody.
I mean, this is old, right? And I wouldn't be surprised if this was just some random, guy trying to get his break. Hears about a movie tie-in, goes to play Vinny for My Cousin Vinny, but has no clue who My Cousin Vinny is. Whoever was directing this wasn't interested in fixing it. But honestly, all of that's pedestrian compared to the plot. Oh God,
I mean,
this is so
I've
terrible
been
that I think everyone owes it to themselves to listen to it for a laugh. It's on Audible.
I have been genuinely like progressing. I think I what am I saying? I'm almost 35. I'm halfway through my life. And I think I've tipped over to the point where I have my childhood is now vintage. The 90s and 2000s are now vintage, right? So
Sadly, yes.
and the worst possible cycle in fashion has hit. So the early 2000s are back in again. So all the ridiculously thin people, the shitty like yoga pants styles and all that crap is coming back. The midriffs. Mean Girls is popular again, which actually I don't mind so much, but it's just I may just stick my head under my desk and just not look at people because of how I really hope they do something not to go there. But
Yeah. But
anyway,
if I could just continue talking about My Cousin Vinny for a minute, because I'm fascinated at how bad
oh
this
go
is.
go ahead.
If
Go ahead.
anybody here is a fan of old noir and likes the old Dashiell Hammett, or Dashiell? Yeah, Dashiell Hammett, I think. Uh, the old Dashiell Hammett stuff, like the Thin Man. This is like somebody wrote the worst Thin Man, My Cousin Vinny crossover fiction ever. And it's such a unique, strange thing to even like write. I don't know. It's beautiful. Please check it out. It's hilarious.
Or don't, but don't enjoy laughter. That's what he's trying to say. Um, what am I going? Uh, I knew there was a point to all of my rambling about all these TV shows and things. That's right. So the biggest thing I'm enjoying recently, because I have a little bit of time now, sometimes in the evening and on the weekend, I have been binge watching Taskmaster from the British panel
Oh,
show.
I fuck
Do you know
yeah,
what
I
that?
know Taskmaster.
I cannot believe I miss. I mean, I love Katherine Ryan, the comedian. She did some really great specials that are up on Netflix, and I enjoy her particular brand of humor. So I watched Taskmaster because she was on series 2 or series 3, I forget which one, and she won it, and she was just very funny. And there was this whole sequence where her task was to make a mess,
Mm.
and everybody else basically trashed the area, and they were supposed to clean it up. Her response to it was to call her sister and tell her sister that her husband was cheating on her.
Yeah, I remember that. Although,
And then and then she had to clean that. It was the commitment. It just that's the kind of brilliance that you not brilliance. What am I saying? Just batshit insanity that you love from the show.
It,
And she's not
it
even the
it's
top.
brilliant lateral thinking, and I still think my favorite moment. I forget which series it was in, but there was something about having to open up and get into a watermelon, but there was no tools, and everyone else is like trying to get this thing open. I think there was like something people were using, and then this one guy just is okay, fine, picks it up and hurls it against the wall as hard as he can. Like it's the
I
lateral thinking in that show. And there's an Australian version out that I did not know had come out, and I need to go watch it.
that's not the that's not the best one you should watch. You should watch the New Zealand. So here's the recommendation I was given. Oh, maybe we should describe
Yeah, I have
Taskmaster
seen the New
before
Zealand
we.
one.
Okay. So Taskmaster is a TV show done by Greg Davies and Andrew
Something.
something. Look, names are not my forte, but the creator is the Andrew dude, is Andrew, and Greg Davies is plays the titular Taskmaster. He sits on a giant throne. He's giving away a trophy that's basically a bust of his head. And he sits down and he like well all they do is they pick five people, usually comedians of either unknowns or some knowns, and actors, and they go off 6 months ahead of time, and they go to this house called the Taskmaster House, and they get given these like baseless tasks to do, things like paint a picture of a horse while riding on a horse, or like make a song or things like that. Simple task and crazy tasks. Some of them are like puzzles. Some of them are just like time tests, physical things. Some are creative projects. Whatever they are, they get a bunch of tasks. They all get filmed doing it, and then they record their reactions as they watch with an audience, and it plays like a little like a variety show. And the creator of it is Andrew, and he apparently created it when he was back in the day when he did it as like a thing to fuck with comedians at a comedian festival, so he could give away trophies and win one himself, whatever. And it is so funny, and it's just a show that's just the right kind of mean. It's like the show's never trying to make anybody look bad. Literally everybody gets to win an episode. Everybody has fun, and the whole point of it is just to hang out with people and do stupid things. This is literally like when you get drunk with a bunch of people, or not even drunk, you just hang out with a bunch of people, and somebody goes like, "Hey, could you lift this egg 15 times
So
with this spoon?"
how
That's it.
how I would describe it is it's like Game Changers from Dropout. It's got a lot of that same energy, but it has a budget.
Oh yeah, it definitely has a budget.
Whereas they can really put together some very elaborate borderline pranks and then call them tasks and then make these people go do them.
The amount of times they just mess with people. I mean, there's literally I love Sarah Millican too. She's another British comedian. Yes, I like a lot of female comedians. I like male comedians too, but I'm gonna mention Sarah Millican because she did this task. She's seen the show before she went on, and they have this habit of like duct taping like things on the bottom of tables and hiding things in corners. So, and if you get whatever the thing is duct tape or hidden, it'll give you an easier way to do your task. Like they'll stick like they'll ask you to make a bridge across a little table with water, but they'll stick all of the materials for building a bridge on the bottom of the table and then hide clues that say look underneath the table. And literally nobody will see it. There were five people, not one of them saw it. I love that episode so much. Um, and Sarah would always check underneath the table. And eventually, what the producers did was they taped something onto the bottom of the table, and she took it out, and it literally said, "Hi, Sarah." Like it's fun. I'm enjoying it. There are honestly British reality slash panel TV just hits better, just because they're not mean. They tried a US version. I watched one episode of it and immediately realized nobody knew what the fuck they were doing. They were all fake, and it felt like it was just awkward and ugly.
In part,
I
I
don't know.
think it's because America has rightfully come to the decision that improv comics and improv comedy should be shunned from society, and thus they had trouble finding people with the right comedic talents for the show.
I don't know what the fuck they were doing. Like, and by the way, I don't agree. We have Saturday Night Live, and I know it's bad a lot of times, but that's where improv comedians go in nowadays. And it's just like I think it's
SNL
such a
is
good show. I just
one
love
of
it.
the reasons why SNL is kind of bad is that it's barely even improv anymore. Ever since like YouTube came in big, they have transitioned themselves to a show that's attempting to chase the really good uh, YouTube viral video, and I don't know, it just has not worked for them for making an actual like show. Outside of Weekend Update, they always find talented people for Weekend Update.
Yes, I will. Weekend Update is really the only thing that I watch on SNL because it rewards jokes. Like it literally just exists to make jokes, and of course, making Colin Jost into a pedophilic racist every Christmas, it's just the best.
Yeah.
That little fuck. I love the one where he has to make fun of Scarlett
Oh,
Johansson.
my favorite's the one where they make people, or it's like you have to say what the other person wrote for you, and one of these guys is white, and the other guy, I forget their names, I apologize, is black, and he's just writing all the most hilarious racist stuff for his co-host to have to say out loud.
Yep.
And it
Uh,
was so awkward, and you could see him dying right there on stage, his soul leaving his body.
I know it's so glorious.
On the subject of souls leaving bodies, though, I think it is
Yes.
time for us to talk about Baleros.
Let us talk. In today's episode, we're going to discuss the sequence of chapters. There's roughly 5 chapters. I think there's some. No, it is just 5 chapters. I thought there was another one that I'm missing.
No, it's like
But
0.0 and 0.1 were in a different one, and there's still a weird different numbering system here. So here we have 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. D.
yeah. So
Coming to a Regal Theater near you.
there is. Yeah, that there are 5 chapters, and we learn about what happens with Geneva after she has been unfor- she suffered a critical injury and has been forced to sort of merge with Okasha, a Selphid that now lives inside of her body and helps her move because she suffered from a spinal injury. And there's like no fix of that. So before we get into the rest of the chapters, here's a thought experiment for everybody. How the fuck does Geneva believe for 1 second that these people can't fix spinal injuries?
I'm confused by this question.
What I mean is, as soon as I apparently this is something that I ended up in like shocked at most people for. Nobody considered the idea that Okasha could have helped Geneva get to somebody that could fix her spinal injury, and that the Selphids and we get introduced to another Selphid here that's sort of there to check up on her and is there to like convince her to come and be a doctor for them. Um, what was his name?
Uh, I do not off the top of my head remember, but I think that you're making an assumption that this was like going to be, I don't know, like fixable. We know from Ryoka's leg
No,
and from other injuries that have happened in the series that some things outside of something really powerful like a regeneration potion.
I would argue that the biggest problem you're saying that they can't just be fixed, but remember, Ryoka's leg got fixed.
Yeah, and it required like specialized knowledge from a incredibly talented and capable necromancer.
Yeah, and the dude who came to meet who like immediately showed up and sort of judged Okasha for invading Geneva's body was like it felt like he was coming and he's like the Sulfid authority. This is the authority for the bodies of Feladan, and I'm the names are coming back to me now one by one. Um, and he's like the way he's presented in the chapters. It felt like he's like an authority. He has power. He's like sort of Magnolia like in power levels. At least that was my impression of him. Which means that he has to have access to those rare resources or know people who can get there. And as with every world that has been demonstrated, money makes all the difference, and power and levels makes all the difference. So why so my first thought was suspicion, because why are they not helping fix her, which would make her grateful? Oh yeah.
Okay, that's suspicion for all the wrong reasons here. Like, fixing that kind of nerve damage would probably take a medical professional, even if they were a Selphid able to feel their way around. A regeneration potion could work, or it could not, because we just don't know enough about what's going on in there, or what the limits of a regeneration potion might be. Like, the text is pretty clear when it states, like, this is a terrible, pretty much unfixable injury.
Mm. I don't know. I don't trust them. I never trusted the Selfids.
Uh-huh,
Not
uh-huh,
because I
uh-huh.
thought Selfids. No, look, I'm not kidding. Like the Selfids as a group, as individuals, it's like anything. But a shadowy organization that comes out of the mist to tell you that, hey, we're not gonna kill you because we think you're a good person and we want you to help us. That's what I'm talking about, Dragons. That's where my suspicions went up. And I had a huge argument with someone later, like when I originally got involved in the Discord and stuff, because I felt like I was the only one who was looking at the difference between, like, thought that this entire thing stank to high holy heavens. I was what was her name? The girl from How I Met Your Mother that Allison Hannigan played, going, this stinks to hell.
Uh-huh.
Oh
I'm
come
just
on,
saying,
don't give me.
I don't want to spoil things, but I think you're seeing some stuff in retrospect here. And if nothing else, I
I'm
think you're
not.
making a pretty bold assumption that, a great deal of text written in that moment and afterwards about Geneva's injury is all wrong. And that it could have just been fixed easily enough, you just needed to throw some money at it.
Look, I will take it. I will take that, and I know what the text said, and that's there. But I never trusted Pirate. I never trusted Pirate. It's by that time in look. I'm the person who had the Torin and Aaron ship. So when I say I have some crazy ideas, I do, and this was one of them. One of the things was that I just didn't trust any storyline in Baleros because I mean, the chapter demonstrates why. Look at how violent the area is. Look at how much damage they do and what the pace that they're willing to go at. Baleros is not a
It
kind
it is
place.
not, but
The
like Okasha is pretty thoroughly on Geneva's side here, and if anyone would have an understanding of this injury, it would be Okasha. And from like the
I
moment
don't know.
Okasha
I
is in
didn't.
there, Okasha's like, "Oh wow, this is bad. I don't think this is fixable."
I didn't doubt Okasha. I said the bodies of Feladan, and what is his name? I can't remember his name. Like the organization that reached out to her, that was like, we're the Watchers of the Selfid, we're the Selfid Authority and all that stuff. That's the one I'm talking about. I don't trust shadowy organizations and these companies. Okasha as an individual, sure, she did it. She gave her opinion based on her experience and what she knows, and I think she was being perfectly honest and very fair. And Geneva made decisions based on that. And that's what it is. But yeah, that's where it is, because we saw two companies wipe each other out in probably the most destructive fashion ever. So much that the Earthers that survived the experience literally went like, we have to form the United Nations. We cannot be like these
Yeah.
people.
And like just to pull this back a little bit and stop getting down this weird rabbit hole, I just to talk about like the UN people and I guess you could call them the Australia group, even though very few of them are actually from Australia.
I think it's
A
Japan,
few from Japan, one
Korea.
from South Africa. It's mentioned that there is a lot of Americans, and there are Australian people, but I don't know if we got a specific head count.
It was Luan is Australian and
No,
Dali
Luan's
is
from Africa.
oh, Luan's from South Africa. So Dali's the
I
Australian.
believe so. At
Okay,
least of people we get names of.
they
But
Oh
I
my god, I just said Dolly. It's daily. It's daily. I'm
I
sorry.
wasn't gonna say anything. I just like I didn't say
Shut
anything
up.
when you called them the bodies of Feladan instead of the bodies of Felden. But if you're gonna mention it, the thing is, I love the way that
I
they
hate.
introduce this and pull us in because we kind of got an introduction to Geneva and to like a bit of what it is to be in Baleros. But the decision to open up this section of chapters with Qualit and what he and his perspective as he's going around, just talking a little bit about the nature of recruiting and finding people, it says a lot about Baleros that like you go into a village to try and recruit people, and there's 3 or 4 other people all trying to get recruits as well. And you're trying to really sell it and get people in. And specifically, I thought the idea of suppression companies was really cool and a great deal.
Okay.
Like, he has the best pitch out there for sure, and it's not a surprise that a bunch of stupid Earthers who haven't caught on to what's happened to them would go for it.
Yeah. Um. Sorry, I got a weird email right in the middle of this, and I got that giant alert in my face that's telling me that it's a work thing. Anyway, so I extremely like the chapters themselves are so Pirate did a really good job of like at least trying to replicate a war story. I don't think they necessarily understood how to show like war in a more like personalized sense. This is not uh what's that story with the soldier from D-Day? The one that won the Oscar?
You'd
God
have
dang
to
it.
be more specific. Like, World War II story has D-Day in it, won an Oscar. I think that's generally a
Oh
wide
my god.
rule. Saving Private Ryan, my
But
guess, though.
that's the one. That's the one. Saving Private Ryan. So this is not Saving Private Ryan. It is definitely unlock Tanya Huff's novels
I
or like
I
any
don't
kind of
think
mill
it really
sci-fi or anything like
wants
that.
to be Saving Private Ryan, though. Like, I think Pirate was pretty clear that as far as military fiction goes, it just is not going to be their forte. So instead, they find
No,
themselves
no.
looking at this and trying to instead really push the fantastical elements of it by portraying this from the perspective of not the regular soldiers and the personal elements and the relationships and just the connection between Geneva and the other Earthers.
Yes. All I was saying was because it isn't that kind of dramatic, heroic story. This is about the futility of the experience. It is the futility of battle. It is the futility of trying to stop things and about the choices we make when under that kind of leveled pressure. The Earth folk when they originally appeared didn't have a lot of choices and they ended up joining up with Gravetender's Fist. And we got to see the unique version of battlefield cleanup that they had to do where they have to like get rid of bodies before they turn into undead and everything. And I think it just Pirate was trying very hard to deglamorize any kind of war or battle and to show that there is like a very distinct difference between the consequences of fights and the what is it
I mean, I
the
think Pirate had already done a pretty good job taking the shine off of that before, both in like the first Geneva chapters, in some of the stuff with like the army that goes to fight the Goblin Lord, stuff with Zell. Like it,
I know, but this is different. I think this was the first time where we got to like be with somebody as they like suppressed undead. This wasn't there was nothing glamorous about this. The exact intent, as far as I could understand, is yes, there are other ways that pirate like deglamorizes war in general, but this was very much pirate's interpretation of what the world would be like, how you would deal with the consequences of magical flotsam that rolls up after a war, and what it would cost people to do that, and how people would do like it's just uniquely an in-world process trying to like sorry it's not a unique in-world process to get rid of the dead, but it is unique that the dead come back to life and eat you if you're not careful.
Yeah, I can think of other settings where, like, if you leave a body around, it might get up and come after you. But taking that to its logical conclusion in this mercenary-based warfare and having these suppression companies come in, like I was saying, yeah, that's really cool. It's really unique. I don't know. I think at this point, Pirate had already done enough stripping the shine off of war and battles and battlefields that it didn't feel like it was a specific goal here. The theme that I found myself really like catching on here was Geneva and Geneva's one woman war against death. Well, at the same time, she is courting death like she is trying to kick Thanos out of bed. Like, she is driven and single minded and a little crazy. Like, not a lot crazy, but something clearly is not going well with her. It's like she has PTSD and she's decided the only solution to it is to drive herself into the ground, healing as many people as she can physically get her hands on before she passes out. Only she won't pass out because she has a Selphid who can give her the brain juice to let her stay awake for long periods of time. So she just keeps
Yeah.
going. And even the Selphid's trying to tell her, hey, take a nap, please.
Mm. She doesn't have much of like, I don't know how to do this. It's like she's a walking trauma magnet. And I talked about this last time we talked about Geneva, but she really does feel like every time I see Geneva, I just sigh and go like, what else is gonna happen to this girl that she's just gonna let happen because she doesn't know how to like manage
Yeah,
it.
she has actively bound herself up in her trauma and repeatedly throws herself into it every chance she gets. And a part of me wonders if there's not at least a certain amount of this where she says, if I leave these battlefields and I take a moment to think, I'm going to have to start thinking again. I'm going to avoid that. Where's the next
Hmm.
patient? But it's. Oh, fuck, what was I about to say? It's both really futile though, because in a lot of ways all she's doing is dragging people back into the conflict, because this is something I'm going to talk about when we get to the floss chapters as well. But this setting, weirdly enough, across all the fights that we've seen, doesn't really seem to have like any kind of military like parole, right? You don't go to the doctor saves you from the brink of the death, and you agree to go head elsewhere. You don't get defeated by Floss, and Floss takes your parole, and you agree to leave and not come back. And in both cases, it's because there's distinct economic incentive not to. Uh, in this case, it's I'm one more body towards us winning because we're a mercenary company, and there's nobody to enforce it if I did agree to leave. And with Floss, well, yeah.
Yeah. I did enjoy the interstitials where Niers is introduced here and there. And the idea is developed that now he sorta knows about the United Nations company and is connecting the dots to Aaron, and the last sequence is just so brilliant where Aaron finally moves the chess piece on the ghost board that he
Yeah.
sent her. It's 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 good. It felt like a satisfying arc. Not a happy arc, but certainly a
Well,
satisfying arc, at least for
there's
me.
things that I think are happy about it. In a lot of ways, Geneva needed people. And in some ways, what she needed was a support system. But by giving her this big group of fresh off the boat Earthers, they're green as hell, they're trapped in this terrible situation. Her desire to protect and nurture and care for people is able to sort of take over in getting them away from the situation and coincidentally bringing her with it. And I think that that is low key. That's what I'm looking for here. She needed somebody to save that she could save herself at the same time, which is something she just did not have until that moment.
Yes. I did. Okay, so let's break down some of the characters straight up. We have Geneva. We talked a lot about Geneva, but we Geneva, Geneva, Geneva. But we have a couple of other characters that are introduced, more than a few. I mean, we have Aiko, we have Ken, we have Kenjiro, and we have Daly, and Luan. So I'm gonna talk about Luan because
Reasons.
man, reasons. Um Luan didn't make a huge impression in his first couple of chapter introductions, but I did immediately look up Olympic rowers, and boy, I had decided, look, there is no way I'll get like a man pillow made of Luan and have it in my bed. That's not gonna happen. I'm just talking about it because we're speculating about what Luan looks like and what kind of person he is, and that's it. That's all I have to say about Luan. But
Oh,
Ken
I,
was
I have
interesting,
stuff
right?
to say about Luan though.
What was so
Well,
good? What do you got
one,
to say about
I
Luan?
immediately zeroed in on Luan as being a pretty cool guy because I did row in. And yeah, oh boy, is like the erg, which is the rowing machine, the single most useful torture device ever invented by man. There's a reason why all those people look fit. It hits every muscle group. If anybody here likes to go to the gym but they aren't hitting the erg, hit the erg. But also, there is an interesting and cool little subplot with him and his family. And this idea that, like, despite having this wife and this child that he loves dearly, he is actively, like, having to struggle to remember them in world. It's like the memory of them is unnaturally fading pretty aggressively.
Yes,
Yes, Oshi wanted
I
to
have
forget that
nothing
he
to
was
say.
married. It's sad.
Yes, it's. I have to admit that the intro. Okay, from a objective point of view, having a character that is old enough to both have a child, be married, and have roots on Earth, this is not something that we've seen before. Or honestly, a lot of the like I look through think about a lot of the Earthers, they're all on like Pirate writes them as young for their ages. A lot of them are sheltered kids from relatively privileged backgrounds who don't have to work, who don't have to do a lot of shit to get where they are going. They're good at things, but they just sound like a bunch of over like sheltered college kids. Daly is the epitome of that. In my head, he's just some blonde dude from Australia who's never seen a damn thing in his life. But Luan is someone who is presented as a person who is like he's straight up on. He has a child. He has a wife. He's led a life. When you get to the point when you, even if you're married young, it still matures you. Just the act of doing these
Yeah.
things doesn't necessarily make you a good father or a good person or anything. But if you're someone who's an Olympian who's had to dedicate your life to something, you don't take steps like that without thinking about it because you've dedicated your life to something, and a lot of people like that shit just doesn't happen. It's a mature decision. It's from a mature person who deals with life in a very different way. The issue with most of the Earth folks that we've met so far are that they are
So,
kids.
well, I agree that a lot of them are literally children. Uh, I don't know if I agree that they're all sheltered and young for their age. We see that a lot, like specifically, the two main central characters, Erin, the chess prodigy who was kind of bumming around the house until she got snatched, and Ryoka, who is Ryoka, and that's just a whole nother discussion. But you look at like the kids that got caught by Magnolia, and they, for the most part, I think come across so bad just because, I mean, the situation. But then you look at like Trey and Terrace, they don't go into specifics about their life before they got pulled over, but they talk about how it was not great. I mean, they weren't like in a really bad way, but they were pretty poor. Terrace talks about living in a bad neighborhood and having to like keep an eye on her little brother when she was taking them home. Like, uh, it isn't universal that they're all like that. But my long running theory has been, and that, you have people like Ryoka, who is this spectacularly talented marathon runner, capable athlete type person. You have Luan, who is literally an Olympian. And yes, I realize he didn't get to compete, but I'm not quibbling on that point right now. Aaron, who is
Mm-mm.
a very talented and capable chess player. I think that it's people being specifically snatched because they have exceptional talent or ability. And that sadly is going to coincide with people who can afford to do that kind of thing, right? Like, you don't get to be an Olympian easily without having a lot of money because it pays shit. It pays shit, and if you don't have the money to like get people invested in you or to invest on your own, then you often don't have a chance to get the kind of training that you need from the right age. Also helps to be born at the
Yeah.
correct time of year. There's a whole thing on how if you look up most birthdays for major sports, all of them stop at March except for basketball.
Yeah. There is and then there's Ken and Aiko who are I don't know if I was saying her name right, but Ken is just he's just the chillest guy who just like I picture like oh my god. I don't even know how to picture Ken because Pyre doesn't really describe him well, but it personality wise, he's just someone who treats people with respect from the beginning to the end. He has a genuine sense of like propriety, and it helps him. And I would have been fascinated to read about somebody like that who. And the weird thing about Ken is that he's actually proactive. He's just proactive in a way that doesn't involve
Yeah, he's
fists.
politely proactive.
I exactly, and I would have loved to read about that, but I guess Pirate's not interested in writing about
I
Ken.
so
But
listen, I don't want to spoil things. I think Ken actually gets great payoffs later on. And I admit, like, I would absolutely watch the isekai about the guy whose dream in life was to be a professional, like, business person, diplomat, negotiator type guy who gets dropped into
you
another
mean an
world. Well,
ambassador?
he wasn't, I think, specifically an ambassador. He was thinking more the business world, but like the context in the story, yeah, definitely more of a well, God, companies are like nations and businesses and corporations at the same time, so kind of both. But I just think that it's really cool. I like that he's been dropped into a world that rewards him for that because he has a passion, and the class system gives him levels in that, and it like helps him a bit with the language barrier, and it's a little bit of a like almost a funny stereotype that he is such a polite guy, but at the same time, you can really feel that's who he is as a person. And he's like respectful, but he doesn't sound like a suck up. Like he's just a great character. But at least as he is in this story, he's kind of a natural support character, kind of like Aiko. Aiko is I don't want to say done dirty here because frankly there's a lot of characters and not everybody gets to be a main character. Some people have to be
Mm-hmm.
Toddy or whoever, name your hanger on in the story you want to name. But like I had to really remember who she was.
Uh, I didn't because I kind of tend to identify with a lot of the side characters with different ways of dealing because I mean, how many times am I gonna read about the guy with the sword who like saves the world? Ooh, that's why I like Erin in the first place
Yeah,
because
that
she refused to be the guy with the sword
yeah,
who
that
saves the
is
world.
this story.
I wish. I guess we're wishing and speculating right now because there isn't a lot of like subtext to these chapters because they are very in your face. They can be violent. They're about harsh choices and the kind of ways we deal with like the consequences of war and whether or not we try to maintain our principles in a battlefield situation or what we do when we're tested in our morals and and the lengths people will go to in a fight. I do think there was one thing that I wanted to like address. The chapters don't do a good job of developing the underlying like reasons why the two companies go to the lengths they do to like murder each other. It was ultimately a pointless fight in a place for resources, But that's not why they ended up murdering each other. It's literally because Pirate didn't develop the idea that both these companies took a risk, the risk didn't pan out, and then even though the risk didn't pan out, the losses they suffered left them in a place where they were like, I'm gonna murder everything or I'm
That
gonna win. And getting to that point, Pirate didn't really
I,
do a good job of
I
developing that.
disagree, but also because I had a slightly different read of the situation myself. Like, at the end of the day, I
Okay.
think narratively the point is that there was barely any point to the conflict. And these mercenary companies at some point stopped it acting like professionals and mercenaries trying to turn their profit and just got caught up in the violence and the anger and the pettiness and just they were trapped in this cycle against each other, and it even gets called out in the story that like they are going, even for Baleros, off the rails. And then you look and
Okay,
you see
but
they say, fuck, whatever happens here, there can't be witnesses, right? And I felt like
yeah,
the desperation and the clawing violence and the need to try and come out on top, not even realizing that at this point you're far too deep in the hole, came across really strongly.
I I'm not sure that's my problem. I'm not sure that it did. There is a sense for me that a lot of what came through, like objectively, it just didn't hit as hard as it could. I wanted to see maybe one perspective from their side, maybe even have some of the Earth kids be part of those companies, and then yes, kill them. Fine, Pirate, just kill them. And maybe it was too far, but I think Pirate sort of went up to the edge of the darkness and then took a step back, which is fine. It's a narrative choice, but
Maybe.
I think that it
Like,
should have gone
I would
there.
have 100% been on board for us getting the build up and narrative of some Earther and he gets dropped into one of these companies and he winds up getting caught up in the violence and then dies at the end, and that would have been depressing and I would have read it and I would have enjoyed it. But I can see why maybe it wasn't what Pirate was aiming for here, because as weird and as dark as this gets, I think it's ultimately kind of hopeful because it's the story of how these people came through this situation and formed themselves together and made the United Nations. And I think what makes it specifically hopeful is that cherry on top at the end with Nears, when he sees it and he describes it as his dream, right? It's this vision that he has in his head: United Nations. And this idea that like good can and will come of this as people can hopefully grow. It just, a whole lot of people died along the way. Also, there was a great pun. I just realized this just popped in my head because I was rereading these over the weekend and then most of them today at work, where Geneva is talking about how it just takes a lot of good experience to be a surgeon, but it's hard to get experience as a surgeon. And then I just thought that was a deliberate experience pun because she's also getting levels. I don't know, that just
Okay.
popped into my head.
Uh, okay, so that about sums up my notes about the chapter. If you're good,
Yeah.
we could just wrap up.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, no, I liked it. I liked the impact. I can't think of any specific notes that come to mind, although when we go to talk about Floss eventually, there's some stuff I want to talk about, mostly involving Ken and this idea that I have forming about some themes across these about passion and leveling. Also something about parole, but like that's going to be a discussion when we talk about Floss and his greatest sin.
Okay, we'll talk. I promise we'll talk about flows
Floss.
next episode. Whatever.
I know.
Let's
I'm just
let's
like
let's just wrap
mentioning
this
that
up.
I have some ideas for the next one, so that our viewers can get excited, or listeners can get excited. Oshi,
Let's wrap it up. Thanks everybody.
good
See you
night.
next time. And stop. Okay. You've been listening to No Killing Goblins. The music on No Killing Goblins was composed by System Glitch. They can be found at youtube.com/systemglitch. You can get in touch with us via our Twitter at NoKillingGoblin or email us at nokillinggoblins with an S at gmail.com.